Ah, the Oscars, the ultimate collection point for all the great movies that have ever come out. Hi guys, so let me start by saying that I really don't like the Oscars, and I guess the reason for that is something that you could guess, given that this is primarily a horror channel. Yeah, the Oscars have never treated horror with any respect whatsoever. Very, very few horror films have ever won an Oscar. There are so many absolute masterpiece horror films that have just been completely overlooked by the Oscar committee. And for that reason, I don't watch it. I've never taken any interest in it. I don't look at my calendar and think, oh, they're going to announce the Oscar nominees next week. Honestly, the whole thing just passes me by year after year. I am a little bit sad about that. I mean, the Oscars is the premier awards ceremony for film, and I am a film fan, and yet I don't like that premier awards ceremony. It's a bit like if a football fan didn't like the World Cup, or an American football fan didn't like the Super Bowl. It's just a little bit weird, isn't it? But it is what it is. I did think about doing a video entirely focusing on the horror films that I think should have had an Oscar or an Oscar nomination, but I think that would have been a very negative video, and I probably would have gone on a bit of a rant. So I've decided to do something a little bit more positive. I'm going to do a ranking of the 20 best films for me that have won the Best Picture at the Oscars. I don't think there are any horror films on this list today. Maybe one, two at most. I can't remember now. But yeah, all of the films I'm going to be talking about today are decent films in my opinion. These are at least some good films that the Oscars chose as the winner of Best Picture. I've not seen all the Oscar-winning films going back to like 1920 something or whatever. I've probably not even seen half of them, to be honest. I looked at the list of films that have won Best Picture at the Oscars the other day. I went through all the years and looked at the list of films, and some of the films that they've given the Best Picture award to, I just find the decisions baffling, honestly. Some of the films in recent years I've never even heard of. Literally, I'm looking at the names of these films and thinking, what the hell is that? But anyway, let's dive into it because we've got a long video ahead. Let's not do too much rambling at the top end. So this is my ranking of the top 20 films that have won Best Picture at the Oscars, and we'll start with the film that I consider to be the 20th best of those movies. This is the only film in today's ranking I don't actually like. That's how much I struggled to put together 20 films today. And given that I had 100 or so to pick from, that just goes to show you how little compatibility there is between my tastes and the Oscars. Anything that doesn't make today's ranking, I either don't like it, I haven't seen it, or I've no interest in seeing it. The Godfather II is a lazy sequel for me. I just don't enjoy watching this miserable twat Michael Corleone boss people around, order people being whacked, kill his brother, treat his wife like shit. 3 hours of that, no thank you. The flashback scenes with Vito Corleone, they're pretty good. I think in an ideal world, we could take the first movie, input all the Vito Corleone flashback scenes into that, so therefore turning the first film into like a 4-hour super film or something like that, and then we just do without the Godfather 2 and 3, because for me there's just not enough interesting story after the first film to justify keeping it going. That's just my opinion anyway. I think this was a bit of a lazy pick for the 1974 Best Picture winner. They'd already given an Oscar to the original film in 72, so to repeat the same thing in 74, could they not have gone for something more original? Something like, say, maybe Black Christmas or the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know? Daring original content, not this lazy rehash film. But I can appreciate that it has some fans. I don't want to piss anybody off. These are just my opinions. I'm not into The Godfather 2, but I do really, really like the first one. Gandhi is a biopic about Gandhi. Everybody knows that. Ben Kingsley plays Gandhi and he's very good. I think I watched this when I was about 12 or 13. I'm not even sure I watched all of it. My memory is that I picked it up about 15 or 20 minutes in. It was on like ITV in the middle of a Sunday afternoon or something. But once I started watching it, I got totally into it. It's a really long film, about 3 hours, maybe even longer than that. And I just really enjoyed discovering about this man's life. I'm not sure I'd even heard of Gandhi before watching it, but by the end, I felt kind of illuminated, actually. Now, we do have to remember that John Carpenter's The Thing came out in 1982 and was not recognised by the Academy as a potential Best Picture winner. But I'm not going to say that The Thing should have won Best Picture, even though I do think it's a better movie than Gandhi. And the reason for that is because I will at least admit that Gandhi is a very important movie historically. I think it's a very educational film. It's a good film to show in schools, actually, if it's not being done already. So I'm going to let the Oscars off the hook on this one. But one thing I will say at least is that it's disgraceful that The Thing didn't even make the list of nominations. I mean, you look at some of the films on there and it's like, ooh. At number 18, we have Gone with the Wind from 1939. My wife is a big fan of this and she persuaded me to watch it one Sunday afternoon. When I saw the runtime, I thought, oh my God, you can't be serious. But once the film started, I actually got into it. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. And the afternoon passed quite quickly in the end. There's a famous scene towards the end of this that I'd always seen in clips throughout my life. So there's like the two main characters stood on a staircase, I think, and one of them says to the other, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." And I'd always presumed that scene was him dumping her for cheating or something. But when you actually get to that scene in the movie and you see the proper context of it, it's not actually about cheating. So I was kind of surprised about that, but the film's really good. My wife's even seen the made-for-TV sequel that they apparently did years afterwards. I love Vivien Leigh, by the way, in this film. What a star. What a shame that she never did any horror movies. Speaking of which, I can't think of anything that came out in 1939, horror or otherwise, that might have been a better fit for Best Picture. So when it comes to this one, at number 17 we have Braveheart from 1995. This one would have come a lot higher today, but for the fact that I really don't like the ending to this film. And when I say the ending, I mean basically the last 20-25 minutes. So there comes a point in this story, and I'm going into spoiler territory here. 3, 2, 1. So Wallace gets captured at a certain point, and then the rest of the movie is just him being tortured until the credits roll. And I just, whenever I think of going back to this film, the memory of that ending just kind of puts me off the idea. What I really wanted from this film was Wallace to just storm the castle at the end, take down Longshanks, and then stand on top of the place, wave the Scottish flag, and everybody in London cheering, and then we'd all look forward to a future of being Scottish instead of English. That's what I wanted from this, and it didn't quite deliver. But the first hour and a half or so, really good stuff. If it wasn't for the ending, this would be one of my favourite historical epics ever. As it is, it's just a film that I can respect. I don't have a problem with this winning the Oscar, you know. But when it comes to films like this, and Mel Gibson, The Patriot that he did 2 or 3 years later, much, much better. At number 16, we have Rebecca from 1940. This is another golden oldie. It's an Alfred Hitchcock film. The reason why I watched it is because I was randomly searching for Hitchcock films on YouTube one afternoon, and I stumbled across this, and I watched it on my phone, I think. It was about 3 or 4 years ago. In terms of genre, this one sort of straddles the line between drama and thriller. It's about this suicidal woman, I think, and she gets rescued at the start of the film by this guy who then takes her to his big fancy house near the sea, and it's clear that they're on the path to having a romance, but there's a little bit of a mystery in the air as to what happened to this guy's ex-wife, and as the film goes on, secrets start to be revealed as we head towards the climax. A thoroughly enjoyable film. Really liked it a lot, actually, and it's shot in such a cool way. Like, the movie just looks so classy for something that came out in 1940. I've only seen about 3 or 4 of Hitchcock films, and I've enjoyed all of them, and it's on my bucket list to have a big long run of them and watch most or all of them one day I'll get around to it, including rewatching this one again. But yeah, this is a really good film. Definitely belongs here in the top 20, certainly. Number 15, we have Rocky from 1976. This, of course, is the ultimate tale of the underdog making it big, taking his opportunity. The only slight thing about this concept is that in the real world, somebody in Rocky's position, they're not suddenly going to get the chance to face off against the champion in whatever sport it is. You know, if you're a snooker player, you're not suddenly going to get a random invite to go and play Ronnie at the Crucible in a big first to 18 match. If you're a tennis player, you're not suddenly going to get the chance to go and face Roger Federer on centre court if you're a local amateur from somewhere. So this sort of thing that happens in this movie doesn't happen in real life. You've sort of got to look past that, though, because there's such a great feel-good factor to be had when you watch the final fight between Rocky and Apollo. I love the expressions on Apollo's face when he realises that Rocky's just not going down. The dating part of this movie is a bit uncomfortable. I don't think some of those dating scenes between Rocky and Adrian have aged so well. Okay, it's cool that they're going for more of a realistic sort of dating story. It's not the traditional two model actors who both know all the right words to say at all the right times, but that scene where Rocky takes Adrian into his apartment is like pure cringe when you watch it these days. But that aside, this is still a classic film. It's not one of my favourite franchises, but I've always ended up somehow rewatching the Rocky films and lately the Creed films from time to time throughout my life. So no complaints about this one getting an Oscar. Rocky's pretty awesome. And so is Apollo Creed. And at the time I'm recording this, Carl Weathers has just passed away like a few days ago, so I will say what an amazing actor. Brilliant in Rocky, brilliant in Predator, brilliant in The Mandalorian, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I can't think of off the top of my head. Carl Weathers, salute, rest in peace. At number 14, we have Platoon from 1986, and I feel like I need to go into rant mode again because Aliens came out in 1986. How Aliens didn't win Best Picture for that year, I do not know. It's just the most wonderful film. I've heard several people over the years who are not even into sci-fi or horror say what a great film Aliens is when they've watched it. How did it lose to Platoon? The mind boggles. I mean, I do like Platoon, hence why it's come this high on the list. It's a decent little stab at a war film. Is it Oscar-winning material? In my opinion, no. I've seen lots and lots of war films, and lots of those I would consider to be better than Platoon, personally. But there's two crimes that have happened here. Firstly, the fact that Platoon won. Secondly, the fact that Aliens didn't even make the nominations list. I mean, you look at some of the films on there, and it's just like, oh. Number 13, we have the 1972 original Godfather movie. And this is the one that I definitely think deserved to win an Oscar. It's an amazing film, way better than number 2. How can anybody say Godfather 2 is better than number 1? I just can't fathom it, honestly. This film not only has a great story, it takes place over quite a long period of time, but it's got likeable characters, like the Don, played by Marlon Brando. Michael Corleone is actually a decent bloke in this film, unlike the second film where he just becomes this arsehole. And we've got James Caan playing Sonny in this one, and so many memorable moments. I love Luca Brazzi's death and all the assassinations that take place near the end. Some great lines of dialogue that are just so memorable, like leave the gun, take the cannoli, and I'll make him an offer he can't refuse. You know, that kind of thing. There's so many great little parts of this. Like when Michael kills the Italian guys in the cafe. That's such an amazing scene. And I actually feel sad when certain things happen in this film, like when he loses his wife in Italy. I couldn't care less what happens to him in numbers 2 and 3. But this film, utterly, utterly great. I'm not even going to look up what other films came out in 72, because I'm sure that nothing would compare to this. Even if Aliens had come out in 1972, I probably would have said, okay, we've got The Godfather, we've got Aliens. I prefer Aliens, but I can totally see why some people might prefer Godfather. So no problem whatsoever. At number 12, we have Titanic from 1998. So this is similar to Braveheart for me in that it's a great film, but I never feel like revisiting it just because of how depressing the ending is. I'm sure I don't need to give spoilers for what happens at the end of Titanic, but it's kind of hard to sit through a second time when you've already seen the film, because the material is really heavy. It's not just what happens to Jack, but all the other passengers as well, because when you're watching it, you're very much aware, I find, that this actually happened for real. People went through this horror of being on a sinking ship and knowing that they were probably going to freeze to death in the water. And there are kids in this scenario as well. I can never forget those two kids who just get put to bed by their mother in the cabin, and you know that they're never going to wake up. It's horrible even thinking about, but the film's still great. I mean, I remember watching it in the cinema, and I was welling up by the end of the film. The romance is done perfectly in this film. The acting's really strong. People might take the piss out of DiCaprio doing his King of the World stuff, but the two performances across the whole movie, from Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, are superb. And the film is a technical marvel, as you'd expect from James Cameron. And what the hell else was going to win from 1998, honestly? I Still Know What You Did Last Summer came out in 1998. They could have picked that. Horror, kicked in the balls, again. At number 11, we have The Departed from 2006, a film I was so sure I would like. I bought the DVD before I'd even seen the movie before, and I bought it when it was full price as well. And I don't regret my actions, because this is a really solid gangster tale about a mole existing in the police department at the same time as the police have a mole amongst the gangsters. So both sides have a mole in each other's camp, sort of thing. And there are some really great twists in the last 20-30 minutes of this. Lots of big name actors as well, like DiCaprio for the second film running today, and Jack Nicholson's really fun to watch as well. So I think The Departed deserved its Oscar. I can't think of anything from around about 2006 time where it's annoyed me that such and such a film didn't win the Oscar. So I guess I'll give the seal of approval to this one. At number 10, we have The Hurt Locker from 2009. This is about a bomb disposal expert in Iraq or Afghanistan. I always forget where the conflict is in this film. It's somewhere in the Middle East. Shame on me for forgetting, but very tense film. It's not just the bombs that need defusing in this. The whole country needs defusing, because you always feel when you're watching this like things are going to kick off at any moment. Like maybe a kid will come around the corner and blow himself up, or somebody will snipe somebody from a window. It's that sort of film. It's really exciting, and I love the ending. Jeremy Renner's final scene is utterly fantastic. Now, I will say that in 2009, I'm sure that was the year that the horror film Triangle came out. Easily the cleverest film I have ever seen in any genre. Not necessarily the best, although it would be up there, but it's certainly the most clever, and I personally would have given the Oscar to that. But The Hurt Locker won. I'm not going to have too many rants from this point onwards. All the films I've put in the top 10 are really good. I mean, I will still mention the occasional one that I think should have won instead of what they picked, but The Hurt Locker's awesome. Really good war film from recent times. Definitely check it out if you've not seen it. At number 9, we have the third Lord of the Rings film. Now, the first two didn't win the Best Picture Oscar when they came out, and the strange thing about that is that I would say this third one is slightly the weakest of the three, but I think the quality is so strong throughout the trilogy that most people will have different opinions about which is the best, although I think Fellowship of the Ring is the best, personally. This third film is an absolute marathon. If you watch the extended cut, it's like 4 hours or something, and I don't mind that when I'm watching it, but the ending is a little bit painful, and I think that's why it's my least favourite, because it just goes on for so long. Like, once the ring goes into the lava, you've still got like another 25-30 minutes of wrap-up still to go. I think they could have cut that down a little bit. Maybe it is a little bit shorter in the theatrical cut. But I like all things Lord of the Rings. I read the book back in the day. I'm not so keen on the Hobbit trilogy. I think the quality dipped for that prequel trilogy. But the Lord of the Rings films are pretty great. And I can't, off the top of my head, think of anything else from 2003 that should have beaten this. At Number 8, we have The French Connection from 1971. This is a police crime thriller starring Gene Hackman. His buddy on the force is that same guy from Jaws, somebody Schneider. I can't remember his full name, but this is absolutely a Hackman vehicle. I mean, Hackman is the star of the show. Schneider's just helping out a little bit. It takes place in Chicago, and the main character, I think his name is Doyle, maybe. He's going after this French villain, and they have a really elongated game of cat and mouse throughout the film. It's really exciting, though. It's very similar to Dirty Harry in terms of tone. You know, it's that same kind of gritty, dirty pavements of the big city sort of police work. We'll have a little bit of a chase, and then maybe we'll go to the hot dog stand and moan about the world to our partner, kind of a thing. You know, I like it a lot. Not so much the sequel. Number 2 takes place in Marseille, and I just didn't enjoy that anywhere near as much. I'm glad that The French Connection 2 didn't pull a Godfather II and pick up a second Best Picture Oscar just because of the name. But this first film is truly great, although I personally would have given the Best Picture Oscar in 1971 to Get Carter. At number 7, we have No Country for Old Men from 2007. This is a kind of chase movie that takes place down near the Mexico-USA border. I'm sure it's somewhere down there. There's a guy who finds a bunch of cash or a bunch of drugs, I can't remember which, and for the rest of this, he's on the run from a killer played by Javier Bardem. He's absolutely frightening, this guy. He makes this film almost feel like the Terminator at times, but it's a really original film. Just when you think you've got this story pegged, like halfway through, we get a few more twists and things happen towards the end that you totally don't expect. But this is a really solid film. It's got Tommy Lee Jones in it as well. I think the main guy is played by Josh Brolin, but I can't remember exactly. It's been like 2 or 3 years since I saw this, so forgive me if I'm wrong. But this isn't a bad pick for a Best Picture Oscar in 2007, although I personally would have gone with the film Sunshine, a sci-fi film. I think it was 2007 Sunshine came out. But yeah, if so, I would have gone with that one. But No Country for Old Men, still very, very good. At number 6, we have Dances with Wolves from 1990. Now, the first thing to say here is that Predator 2 came out in 1990, and I personally would have given the Best Picture Oscar to Predator 2, but I am something of a super fan of that film. I know that the rest of the world doesn't quite view it the same way that I do, but for me it's like the perfect blend of horror and action. I just absolutely love it. For me, it's one of the best sequels ever. I love Predator 2. Dances with Wolves is very good as well, I will concede. I watched it a few years ago. I've only seen it the one time, but I do have good memories of it. It was definitely of a very, very high quality. It's about this soldier played by Kevin Costner, and he's sent to a remote outpost somewhere. God knows what era it is, but he ends up leaving his post and integrating himself with a local tribe. He joins their reservation and he becomes one of them. He takes a wife, he learns their language, he helps them fight off marauders. He becomes one of them, you know, and we watch this transformation take place over the course of about 6 hours. It's a really long film. It's not that long. The extended cut that I saw, maybe 3.5, 4 hours, but it's a top quality drama film, I will say. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But despite the fact that Dances with Wolves is undoubtedly a classic film, I still don't think it comes anywhere near to the sight of somebody going, Scorpio is ready. Now that's filmmaking. I mean, they had the best supporting actor right there in front of them, and they just ignored him. At number 5, we have Unforgiven from 1992. This is a Western starring Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman. So Eastwood is the star of the show. He's an old gunman who goes after Gene Hackman's corrupt lawman. That's the short version. There's other stuff in this story as well, stuff to do with prostitutes and a half-blind cowboy, but I'm not going to explain the full complexities of Unforgiven. You've probably already seen it, but it's a damn fine example of how to do a Western film. But, and you know what's coming, also in 1992 we had Alien 3. I mean, come on! Alright, if the director's cut of Alien 3 had come out in 1992, I would have been a little bit more annoyed, because I think Alien 3 is hugely underrated, but given that they only had the theatrical cut to judge at the time, I'm going to let the Oscars off for this one. But we also had Candyman in 1992, and that film is an absolute masterpiece, and it was at the time of release. It didn't have no director's cut touching it up later. It was brilliant when it came out. So how they didn't pick Candyman to even be nominated, I don't know. I mean, Candyman could have won like 8 Oscars. It could have been nominated for Best Screenplay, Best Soundtrack, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor. It could have won anything. I mean, it was so great. But what did it get? Pretty much nothing. I'll tell you what, if Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman had been in Candyman, I bet you would have had a completely different result. Honestly, like Clint Eastwood playing the main part. So you called my name 5 times, but do you dare say it a 6th time, punk? I dare you. That would have been shit, but it probably would have won Candyman the Oscar. At number 4, we have Silence of the Lambs from 1991, an excellent film, truly. However, I do have a couple of issues with this one. Firstly, I think Terminator 2 should have won in 1991. Secondly, every now and again you'll see an article online which lists the horror films that have had success at the Oscars, but like half the films on the list, which is a very short list anyway, are not even proper horror films, and this is a case in point. Silence of the Lambs is more of a crime police thriller with a sprinkling of horror on it. It's not a warts and all horror film. And another example is Misery. I can't remember which Oscar Misery won or was nominated for, but you'll see that on any list of horror films that have had success at the Oscars. And again, I would think to myself, well, it's a thriller. It's not a horror film at all. So something to bear in mind. You know, if people point to a list of horror films that have won Oscars, you can say, well, it's a short list anyway. And secondly, half of those films aren't even proper horror films. But let's move on. Silence of the Lambs, it's terrific. I will say that, hence why it's come so high today. Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster are brilliant in this film. I love Buffalo Bill in this as well. You've got 2 legendary villains in the same film here, albeit they never meet, which is kind of weird and also a little bit sad. But I've seen this film regularly since the mid-90s probably, and I think I've told this story on the channel before, but I'll tell it again. I bought a really nice steelbook version of this once, and on the way home I left it in a cafe by accident. At number 3, we have Oliver from 1968. There's only about 5 musicals that I like, and the one that I probably should watch because I'm a horror fan, Anna and the Apocalypse, I've still not gotten around to seeing, but I've always loved this film. I've watched it every now and again since I was a kid. It's always fascinated me, this story. I always used to feel sorry for the boy having to go to that workhouse and eat gruel. You know, it used to make me feel really grateful that I had 2 parents and a house to live in, you know. And this isn't just a film with great songs in it. It's got a great story that you can follow, watching this kid go on his little adventures and eventually get his adoptive family by the end. There's so many great songs, lots of great characters as well. Oliver and the Artful Dodger and Fagin and Nancy and her friend, and Bill Sykes as well, played by Oliver Reed. God, what a terrifying character he is in this movie, especially if you're a kid watching the film. Always made me sad what happens to Nancy in this. But I love the ending. Artful Dodger and Fagin just dancing away into the sunset. This is just a wonderful, wonderful film. Talking about it now has made me want to watch it again, actually. I don't own a single musical in my collection, even though I've got like hundreds of Blu-rays. I should probably make this my first musical, I reckon. At number 2, we have Schindler's List from 1993, and given that Jurassic Park came out in 93, I imagine it was quite close between those 2 films. I'm not sure if Jurassic Park got nominated, truth be told, but this is a fantastic film. It's a war movie. I've seen it maybe 3 times over the years. It's a long one. It's about 3 hours long. It's about an Austrian businessman who sort of fights back in any way he can against the German hierarchy and all the bad things that are going on during World War II. Fascinating stuff, because it's real history playing out here, and it's such great filmmaking. The first hour and a half in particular, it's so gripping, but the entirety of the thing, I've never turned this off once I've started watching it. You just can't take your eyes off it. It's a brilliantly made film. It's not one that I own. I've got a good little collection of war films, but this isn't among them. I think it's because it's a film that's on TV regularly enough. You can always find it on some streaming platform or another. That's probably why I've never bought it. But at some point, I think, just like Oliver, I think this will be one that I buy. It's great. And at number 1, we have Gladiator from the year 2000. So this is my favourite film that has ever won the Best Picture category at the Oscars. It's certainly not my favourite film ever. I did a video about a year ago maybe, which was my top 100 films of all time, and I'm pretty sure Gladiator was in there, but I honestly can't remember where I put it. I don't think it would have been in the top 10 or top 20, but I'm not sure in all honesty. I just know it wouldn't have been one of the few at the very top sort of thing. But this is a great film. I still remember going to see it. I was dating this girl in uni, and I think it was a Saturday afternoon. We just decided to go and see anything. It's not like we were particularly looking forward to Gladiator. This just happened to be on, so we went to watch it. And I think I was just expecting some run-of-the-mill Hollywood action film, forget it in 5 minutes. But when I came out of the cinema, I was almost shaking. I was like, I'd had a religious experience or something. Emotions were all over the place. I was like, whoa, I've got to process this film. That was awesome, At some point later down the line, I bought the DVD version, which I think had the extended cut on it. And I've never upgraded that, but this is a legendary film. You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who doesn't think Gladiator is amazing. It's just a terrific film. Really, really great. And I'm looking forward to watching Gladiator 2 when it comes out next year. Can't believe we're getting a sequel finally after all these years. It's not like we asked for it, but I'm really intrigued by it because Ridley Scott's doing it, and I'm sure he wouldn't have done it unless there was a really good script and a lot of budget to go with it. If it was just some random director, you'd think, oh, they're just trying to do a little bit of a knockoff here with half the budget or whatever. But the fact that Ridley Scott's doing it, it's got me really fascinated to see it. So we'll see what they do with that. But that wraps up today. This was my top 20 films that have ever won the Best Picture Oscar, and this is how I would order those 20 movies. If you can think of any Oscar-winning films that you think I should check out, then by all means leave them in the comments. I can't promise I'll watch them, but there we go. I've done a video about the Oscars. Now I can move on to more normal waters. Okay, until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.